The bruises on Emma's wrists had faded to a yellowish green, but the ones on her heart remained purple and fresh. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the women's shelter, clutching the only photograph she'd managed to grab before fleeing her grandmother, smiling beside a field of sunflowers. The old woman had been dead 3 years now, and Emma had never felt more alone than she did in this moment, listening to the sounds of other broken women moving through the hallways, each carrying their own weight of fear and shame. She was 24 years old and felt ancient. The man she'd thought would be her forever had systematically dismantled every piece of her self-worth over 2 years, until she'd become a ghost of herself, flinching at shadows and apologizing for breathing. When she'd finally found the courage to leave, she'd done so with nothing but the clothes on her back and $17 in her pocket. The shelter counselor had assured her she'd done the right thing, but sitting here now, staring at walls painted the color of old cream, Emma wasn't sure she'd done anything right in her entire life. The job offer had come through the shelter's employment program, a ranch work in Montana, over 1,000 miles from the Texas apartment where she'd lived through her nightmare. The position included room and board, and Mrs. Patterson, the ranch owner, had specifically asked for someone who needed a fresh start. Emma had said yes before she could talk herself out of it, even though she knew nothing about ranching and even less about Montana. Anywhere had to be better than here, where every street corner held a memory of his anger, his fists, his voice telling her she was worthless. 3 days later, she stepped off a Greyhound bus in a town so small it barely warranted a dot on the map. The air smelled different here, clean and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and something wild she couldn't name. Mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer heat. Emma stood on the sidewalk with her single duffel bag, watching the bus disappear down the highway, and felt the first stirrings of something that might have been hope if hope hadn't seemed like such a dangerous thing to hold. A truck pulled up, dust billowing from its tires. An older woman with silver hair and kind eyes climbed out. "You must be Emma. I'm Margaret Patterson. Welcome to Montana." Her handshake was firm but gentle, and she didn't ask about the fading bruise on Emma's cheekbone that no amount of makeup could fully hide. "Let's get you home." The ranch sprawled across a valley so beautiful it made Emma's chest ache. Horses grazed in distant pastures, and the main house sat sturdy and welcoming beneath a grove of cottonwood trees. Margaret showed her to a small cabin out back, clean and simply furnished, with windows that looked out toward the mountains. "This is yours for as long as you need it," Margaret said. "Dinner's at 6. Come up to the main house when you're settled." Emma unpacked her few belongings and sat on the bed, really sat without the tension that had been her constant companion for so long. The silence here wasn't threatening. It was vast and peaceful, broken only by birdsong and the distant whinny of horses. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. At dinner, she met Margaret's son, Cole. He was tall and lean, maybe 30. With sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. When Margaret introduced them, he simply nodded and said, "Mom," his voice quiet and respectful. He sat at the opposite end of the table and didn't ask her any questions, didn't press for conversation, just passed the dishes when needed and complimented his mother's cooking. Emma found his silence comforting rather than awkward. She'd had enough of men who filled every space with their presence. The work started the next morning. Margaret began teaching her the basics of how to muck stalls, mix feed, recognize when a horse was favoring a leg. It was physical labor, harder than anything Emma had done before, but she threw herself into it with desperate determination. Her muscles ached, her hands blistered despite the gloves, but the pain felt clean somehow, honest. She was building something rather than being torn down. Cole worked the ranch alongside them, but he kept his distance from Emma, never speaking unless necessary, never standing too close. At first, she appreciated it. But as days turned to weeks, she began to notice things about him. The way he was infinitely patient with the animals, speaking to them in low, soothing tones. How he always did the heaviest work without complaint, often taking on tasks before anyone else could. The careful way he moved, economical and deliberate, never sudden or jarring. One afternoon, Emma was struggling with a particularly stubborn gelding who refused to be led back to his stall. She pulled on the lead rope, frustration mounting, her voice rising in pitch. The horse tossed his head and planted his feet more firmly. Easy. Cole's voice came from behind her, quiet as always. She startled anyway, the old fear reflexive. He must have seen her flinch because he immediately took 2 steps back, raising his hands slightly, palms out. Sorry. Didn't mean to spook you. Would you like some help? Emma's heart was racing, but not from the horse. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole moved forward slowly, telegraphing every motion. See, Thunder here, he's what we call a push horse. The more you pull, the more he digs in. It's not meanness, just his nature. He positioned himself behind the gelding and made a soft clicking sound. Come on now, big guy. Let's go get you some dinner. The horse's ears swiveled back toward Cole's voice, and after a moment, he took a step forward, then another. Cole walked behind him, never touching the rope Emma still held, just encouraging with his voice and presence. Thunder walked docilely to his stall. How did you do that? Emma asked. Cole smiled slightly, his eyes on the horse rather than her. Sometimes the gentlest approach works best. Animals respond to patience and calm. Force just makes them scared or defensive. He hung the halter on its hook. Same is often true for people, I reckon. Something in the way he said it made Emma wonder what he knew, what Margaret might have told him. But he didn't pry, didn't look at her with pity or curiosity. He just tipped his hat and went back to work. As summer deepened into fall, Emma found herself slowly unfurling like a flower that had been clenched tight against the frost. The work gave her structure and purpose. Margaret's steady kindness gave her safety. And Cole's quiet presence became something she looked forward to rather than feared. He never pushed, never demanded her attention or conversation. But he was always there, holding a gate open as she led a horse through, leaving a fresh thermos of coffee on the fence post where she worked, asking her opinion on whether Emma's new foal should be named Pepper or Storm. One evening, Emma stayed late in the barn, brushing down a young mare who seemed anxious. The rhythmic motion of the brush was meditative, and she lost track of time. When she finally put the grooming tools away and stepped outside, full night had fallen. The darkness was absolute in a way it never was in the city, and despite months of living here, it still sometimes unsettled her. She was halfway to her cabin when she heard footsteps behind her. Every muscle in her body locked. Her breathing went shallow. The footsteps stopped. Emma. Cole's voice, careful and low. I saw the barn light was still on. Wanted to make sure you made it back okay. A pause. I'll keep my distance. Just going to walk behind you a ways. Make sure you get home safe. That all right? She managed to nod, though she wasn't sure he could see it in the darkness. I'll take that as a yes. You just go on. I'm here. She walked to her cabin with Cole following 30 feet behind, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. When she reached her door and turned, she could just make out his silhouette. Thank you, she said. Anytime. Sleep well, Emma. She watched him walk away into the darkness, and something cracked open inside, touched her, something that had been frozen solid for so long she'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Winter came early to Montana that year. Emma had never experienced cold like this, the kind that made her breath crystallize and the morning frost paint intricate patterns on her windows. She learned to layer clothing, to break ice on water troughs, to read the sky for signs of incoming storms. The work was harder in the cold, but she'd grown stronger. Her hands were calloused now, her body lean and capable. When she looked in the mirror, she sometimes saw glimpses of someone she'd thought was lost forever. On a particularly brutal December morning, Emma was trying to repair a section of fence that had come loose in the wind. Her fingers were numb despite the gloves, and she couldn't get the wire to cooperate. Frustration welled up, and dear sir, half from cold, half from the sheer stubbornness of the broken fence ear, started to freeze on her cheeks. Here, Cole appeared beside her with a pair of wire cutters and pliers. These might help more than what you've got. They worked together in companionable silence, Cole showing her the technique with patient hands, never taking over completely but supporting where she struggled. When they finally got the fence secured, Emma pulled off her gloves to examine a splinter she'd gotten despite the leather. Cole was closer than he usually stood, looking at the fence to make sure it would hold. Emma found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the crow's feet around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, the gentleness in his expression even when he didn't know she was watching. "Cole," she said softly. He turned to her, and the question in his eyes was so open, so without expectation or demand, that the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Why are you always so careful around me, like I might break?" His expression shifted to something sad and understanding. "Because I reckon you have broken, and anyone with eyes can see you've been putting yourself back together, piece by piece. Figured the least I could do was give you the space to do that without making you feel crowded or afraid." Emma's throat tightened. "Your mother told you about why I came here. She told me you needed a safe place. That was all I needed to know." He looked out toward the mountains, giving her the option to not be watched while being vulnerable. "My father, before he died, he had a temper. Never hit Ma or me, but he could be harsh with his words. His expectations made himself and everyone around him pretty miserable. I saw what that kind of thing did to Ma. How she'd shrink herself to avoid setting him off. Swore I'd never be that kind of man." "You're not," Emma said with certainty. "You're nothing like that." He met her eyes then, and the intensity that took her breath away. "I'm glad you think so, because I'd like to be honest with you about something, if that's okay." Her heart hammered, but she nodded. "I've come to care about you, Emma, more than I probably should, given that you work here and all. But I want you to know that doesn't mean I expect anything from you. Not your time, not your affection, not anything. You don't owe me a damn thing for being decent to you. That's just basic humanity. I just thought you should know, in case you ever wondered why I leave you coffee or make sure you get home safe. It's because you matter to me. And I don't need you to feel the same way back." Emma stared at him, this patient cowboy who'd spent months proving that not all men were dangers to avoid. He'd never once made her feel trapped or obligated, never used his size or strength to intimidate, never demanded her attention or gratitude. He'd just been there, steady and kind, letting her heal at her own pace. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. I don't know if I can be what you want. I want you to be happy and safe, that's all." His voice was rough with emotion. "If that's with me, I'd count myself the luckiest man alive. If it's not, I'll still be grateful I got to know you." The tears came then, but they weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of release, of hope cautiously unfurling, of realizing that she was allowed to want something good for herself. "I care about you too," she said. "But I need to go slow." "I need a time," Cole finished. "All the time you need, Emma." "I'm not going anywhere." As winter deepened, they did go slow. Cole asked permission before entering her space. He never assumed he could touch her, always checking first, "Can I help you with your coat? Or would you like to take my arm? Ice is slick here." The first time Emma reached for his hand instead of waiting for him to offer, his face lit up like sunrise over the mountains. Their first kiss happened on a February evening when the northern lights painted the sky in sheets of green and purple. They were standing by the horse pasture, breath misting in the freezing air, watching the impossible beauty overhead. Emma turned to Cole and found him watching her instead of the lights. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she breathed, and rose on her toes to meet him. It was gentle and sweet and nothing like she'd feared a first kiss might be. His hands cupped her face with infinite care, his lips soft against hers. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Was that okay?" he asked. She laughed, really laughed, the sound carrying across the snow-covered fields. It was perfect. Spring came slowly to Montana, but it came. The snow retreated, revealing new grass and wildflowers. The horses shed their winter coats, and the ranch burst back into life. Emma had been there almost a year now, and she barely recognized the terrified woman who'd stepped off that Greyhound bus. One evening, she and Cole sat on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. She was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, a position that would have been impossible for her to tolerate a year ago. Now it felt like home. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily and true. "I don't think I knew what love was supposed to feel like before you. I thought it was supposed to hurt, supposed to make you smaller. But you've shown me it's supposed to make you bigger, braver, supposed to feel safe." Cole turned to her, his eyes shining. "I love you too, Emma. You're the strongest person I've ever known." "I'm not strong. I ran away. I was broken." "You survived," he corrected gently. "You escaped something terrible, and you put yourself back together. You learned new skills, built a new life, and found the courage to trust again. That's not weakness. That's the definition of strength." Emma thought about the woman she'd been scared, diminished, convinced she deserved the cruelty she'd endured. And she thought about who she was now, capable, healing, loved by a good man who treated her with the respect and gentleness she'd always deserved. The journey between those two versions of herself had been long and painful, but sitting here with Cole's steady heartbeat beneath her ear and the Montana sky stretching endlessly above them, she knew she'd finally found what she'd been running toward all along. "Will you marry me?" Cole asked suddenly. "Not now, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready, even if it takes years. I just want you to know that I'm in this forever, if you'll have me." Emma lifted her head to look at him, this patient cowboy who'd shown her that love could be gentle, that men could be kind, that she was worth cherishing. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. To forever, to love, to the life we are building together." When he kissed her this time, it was with joy and promise, and Emma finally understood that she wasn't broken anymore. She was whole, and she was home.